A major severe weather pattern is coming, and it's going to be very dangerous. The jet stream is about to shift, which will lead to multiple powerful storm systems over the next couple of weeks. These storms will interact with warm and humid air, creating an environment capable of producing widespread severe thunderstorms. This pattern will gradually intensify as we head into next week. This will also lead to repeated impacts across the same areas, marking the start of an unusually active stretch of severe weather. We have a lot of big updates in this forecast, including my receding hairline, so let's get right into it. I want to jump straight into the severe weather potential over the next few days, beginning with what is happening today, Thursday. There is a level 2 out of 5 slight risk of severe weather from Montana into southwestern Minnesota, along with a large marginal threat encompassing around 10 million people, stretching from Oklahoma to Minneapolis and even into Billings, Montana. All severe weather hazards will be on the table today. We're talking about two main areas where the highest chance of tornadoes will be. First, scattered damaging wind gusts of 60 to 70 miles per hour are possible, along with pocket change-sized hail across the Central Plains. Areas including South Dakota, Nebraska, Northeast Wyoming, and Montana could see tennis ball to baseball-sized hail later this afternoon into the evening. Today's tornado threat is split between two different regions. The main area appears to be across South Dakota, Nebraska, and Wyoming, where isolated tornadoes are possible, especially northwest of Sioux Falls. A secondary area to watch stretches west of Kansas City through Omaha, Lincoln, and near Des Moines. If tornado warnings are issued in that area and conditions appear concerning, we'll likely go live, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Tornadoes will remain possible throughout the late afternoon and early evening. As we head into Friday, the severe weather threat shifts to the Midwest. Cities like Chicago, Milwaukee, and surrounding areas have not experienced much severe weather recently. After a very active April, May remained relatively quiet, but that is beginning to change. Friday looks to be one of the first more active severe weather days, with additional rounds likely through the middle of June. A large slight risk stretches from northern Kansas into Des Moines, Omaha, and far western Wisconsin. A broader marginal risk extends into Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan, where damaging winds are expected to be the primary concern. The Storm Prediction Center has mentioned that an enhanced risk for damaging winds could be introduced if confidence grows in a line of thunderstorms. If you live in Iowa or Nebraska, it may be a good idea to secure loose outdoor items like trampolines. Large to very large hail is also possible, including baseball-sized hail from some of the initial supercells near Omaha, Des Moines, and south of Sioux Falls. There is also the threat of 1 or 2 isolated tornadoes, and this risk could expand in future outlooks. The area may shift farther east, potentially including Omaha and even Des Moines. Saturday is shaping up to be another active severe weather day. A level 2 out of 5 slight risk is in place for Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and New York. These areas have seen very little severe weather over the past month, but activity is expected to return. A larger marginal threat extends into Massachusetts and Maine, where damaging winds, large hail, and a couple of tornadoes appear possible. Across the far northern plains, another slight risk covers some rural areas where damaging wind gusts and a low tornado threat will be possible. Looking ahead to Sunday, a slight risk of severe weather is already in place across parts of North Dakota, mainly including Bismarck. Damaging winds, hail, and perhaps a few tornadoes are possible. Tuesday is also raising concern, with a day 6 slight risk already outlined for North Dakota as a strong low-level jet begins to develop. This setup could potentially lead to a tornado outbreak, although exactly where that occurs remains uncertain. The Storm Prediction Center is increasingly confident that North Dakota will at least be involved, though the threat area could shift farther east or south depending on forecast model trends over the next few days. The early to middle portion of next week is being watched closely for a major uptick in severe weather, likely impacting a large portion of the northern plains and Midwest. Before diving deeper into the timing of severe weather, let's take a moment to talk about today's sponsor. Have you ever been lying in bed late at night, Googling symptoms and convincing yourself something might be wrong, but never actually booking an appointment? After hours of searching what seemed like a simple headache, it suddenly felt like it could be anything from stress to something much more serious. serious. That's why I started using today's sponsor, ZocDoc, and it completely changed the way I handle this kind of thing. ZocDoc is a free website where you can find and book in-network doctors across all 50 states. You can search by specialty or symptoms, read real patient reviews, and find someone who feels like the right fit for you. You can even see real-time availability and book instantly without phone calls or waiting around .coms. Most appointments happen within 24 to 72 hours, sometimes even the same day. I personally use ZocDoc to schedule an appointment between two very active severe weather days, and it helped me make sure my health stayed a priority. So if you've been putting something off, stop waiting and visit ZocDoc.com/maxvelocity or click the top link in the description below to find a doctor that works for you. It might seem like a small step, but clicking that link can be a big move toward prioritizing your health. Thanks again to ZocDoc for partnering with us and helping everyone take better care of their health. Before we talk about the timing of severe weather, I want to highlight something very interesting about our setup over the next 3 days. The low-level jet. What we're looking at today is a fascinating setup with a strong pocket of low-level winds developing from Wichita into Des Moines. This won't just help organize storms, it could also increase the potential for higher-end tornado activity if storms can remain discrete. Right now, the tornado risk is only around 2%, and one of the biggest concerns is whether storms can stay organized. However, if conditions begin trending upward throughout the day, I could see a 5% tornado risk being introduced for areas from Salina back into Marysville. Another localized corridor worth watching stretches across South Dakota near Rapid City and Gillette. I don't think the tornado threat there will be as significant today, but the risk is still worth monitoring. Tomorrow also presents an interesting tornado setup across parts of the Midwest. Storms developing later this evening across Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, and South Dakota could leave behind a remnant area of spin known as a mesoscale convective vortex in Iowa. If that happens, it may create a localized environment favorable for a low-end tornado threat across parts of Illinois, Wisconsin, and eastern Iowa, possibly even a bit stronger depending on how things evolve. This would likely be a very small-scale storm system developing during Friday afternoon. If you live in Chicago, Milwaukee, Peoria, or Springfield, it would be wise to stay alert on Friday. The risk remains conditional and fairly uncertain for now because it depends heavily on how today's storms evolve. We'll have another video tomorrow morning breaking down exactly what to expect. Another area to watch will be Iowa and Nebraska, although many storms there are expected to upscale quickly, which could suppress the tornado threat. Saturday brings yet another severe weather threat across the Great Lakes. The overall pattern suggests mostly westerly winds, meaning this should primarily be a damaging wind event. If winds were coming more from the southwest, we'd likely see a stronger rotating supercell threat. While I'm not ruling that out completely for Saturday, the overall tornado risk appears low. Straight line damaging winds remain the main concern, and don't be surprised if future outlooks increase severe weather probabilities. Now let's go day by day with the timing of severe weather, beginning with today. Storms are expected across much of the Great Plains, while the East Coast remains relatively quiet. If you live in the Dakotas or the Central Plains, severe storms are expected to begin developing sometime between 2 and 5 p.m., especially around Watertown and Aberdeen in South Dakota. This appears to be the primary corridor for severe weather today. The biggest concerns there will be large hail and damaging winds, though 1 or 2 tornadoes are possible. A few storms are also expected to develop in Wyoming and Montana, where large to very large hail and damaging winds may occur, although activity there may not ramp up until closer to 5 or 6 p.m. Across Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas, the majority of severe storms are expected between 2 and 8 p.m. If you live from Salina to Des Moines, monitor for increasing threats of damaging winds, large hail, and a few tornadoes. The tornado threat could increase in future outlooks if storms are expected to remain more discrete. However, if storms become more clustered and messy, the current lower-end tornado risk will likely remain in place. By around 9 to 10 p.m., most storms should begin weakening. Overnight into Friday morning, leftover energy from the Central Plains will move into the Midwest. Additional energy near Sioux Falls could feed into the environment and potentially create a mesoscale convective vortex. If that develops, it may increase the tornado threat during the early to mid-afternoon hours near Chicago, Davenport, and Milwaukee. That said, this remains a fairly conditional setup and will depend heavily on how today's storms evolve. There is a chance a tornado risk could be introduced in the next outlook for this region. Right now, forecast models are inconsistent. Some show storms lasting into Chicago and Milwaukee, while others weaken them much earlier or show very little development at all. There is still significant uncertainty, but we'll continue monitoring the situation closely. The primary severe weather threat on Friday is expected during the mid to late afternoon. Storms are likely to begin developing around 5 to 6 p.m., stretching from Kearney, Nebraska into Minneapolis. Most of these storms are expected to produce damaging winds and hail. I know the setup might look a little scary on the RRFS model with some discrete supercells showing up, but personally, I think these storms are going to upscale very quickly. Because of that, I believe the window for discrete tornadic supercells will be fairly limited. However, once this line of storms begins to organize and evolve into a powerful thunderstorm complex, the damaging wind threat could become very significant, potentially even more destructive than a tornado in some areas. Wind gusts between 60 and 85 miles per hour are possible near Omaha, Des Moines, and as far east as Davenport and Rockford during the mid to late afternoon and continuing into the early overnight hours. If you live in the Midwest and are under the severe weather risk, now is the time to secure loose outdoor items, including trampolines, lawn furniture, and anything else that could become airborne in strong winds. As we head into Saturday, the severe weather threat shifts into the Great Lakes region. At this point, the primary concern appears to be damaging winds. I expect the tornado threat to remain relatively low because low-level winds will mainly be coming out of the west, which is generally not favorable for a higher tornado risk. Even so, storms are expected to become numerous and widespread, likely disrupting afternoon plans across Indianapolis, Springfield, Illinois, Cleveland, and Detroit. Damaging winds, large hail, and frequent lightning are all possible, and an isolated tornado cannot be ruled out with the strongest supercells. Storm activity may stretch as far west as Kansas City and extend along the I-7 corridor toward Buffalo and near Pittsburgh. Saturday is shaping up to be a stormy afternoon and evening across much of the region. The most unusual aspect of this weather pattern is the major shift expected early to mid next week. We are looking at a much different jet stream setup than what we've experienced over the past month. Conditions have remained relatively calm across most of the country, with very few major severe weather outbreaks during May. That may be about to change. A large dip in the jet stream is expected to develop across the western United States and into the Great Plains. Forecast models currently show a low-pressure system developing near Salt Lake City and Spokane, combined with a very strong southerly and southwesterly flow. This is a setup worth paying close attention to. The European model is currently highlighting a broad area of concern stretching from New Mexico and Texas all the way into Minnesota. If this setup materializes, the early to middle portion of next week could feature a significant severe weather outbreak, and potentially even a tornado outbreak, depending on how the system evolves. One major uncertainty is exactly where the low-pressure system ultimately settles. Some models keep it farther west, similar to recent setups that have limited major severe weather across the Great Plains over the last week. Other models shift the system farther east, which could bring a much greater impact to the Midwest and Great Lakes. At the very least, this is something we'll be watching closely. There is growing potential for this to become the next major severe weather outbreak after a relatively quiet stretch over the past month and a half. Looking at rainfall totals over the next 7 days, precipitation does not appear overly impressive for much of the country. Across the Northeast, only light rainfall is expected, generally ranging from a few hundredths of an inch up to around half an inch in parts of New Hampshire and Vermont. In the Southeast, widespread rainfall totals of 1/2 inch to 1.5 inches are expected, with cities like Birmingham, Memphis, and Little Rock benefiting the most. Meanwhile, Miami could receive as much as 5 to 7 inches of rain as tropical showers and downpours continue over the coming days. Across the Midwest, most areas are expected to receive between 1/2 inch and 1 inch of rainfall. Some locations, including Omaha, Des Moines, and Maryville, could see higher totals on Friday due to slow-moving severe thunderstorms. In the Southern Plains, widespread rainfall amounts of 1/2 inch to 1.5 inches are expected. Along the West Coast and in the desert Southwest, little rainfall is anticipated, which is fairly typical for this time of year. The Pacific Northwest Northwest, including Seattle and Portland, could pick up some light rainfall through the weekend and into early next week. There is also a chance to see the northern lights tonight due to a possible geomagnetic storm. Updates will be posted on social media regarding any forecast changes. Cloud cover may limit visibility across parts of the northern plains tonight, especially from Kansas into Minnesota, due to ongoing severe weather. However, areas like Minneapolis, Milwaukee, Chicago, and much of the Northeast are expected to see mostly clear skies. Conditions also look favorable across much of Canada, except near Winnipeg. If skies are clear in your area, it may be worth stepping outside to take a look. However, if thunderstorms are nearby, remember, when thunder roars, go indoors. Severe weather can make conditions dangerous and significantly reduce visibility. As always, thank you for following today's forecast. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Thanks again to ZocDoc for sponsoring today's forecast. You can also check out Weatherfront, now available on desktop and iOS through the links in the description. Let us know what you think, and we'll see you in the next video or live update.